The day I realized loneliness is the price of motherhood was not the day my children left home. It was much later. On a quiet Sunday morning when I woke up, made tea for two, and then remembered there was no one left to share it with. I still poured the second cup, out of habit. I placed it across the table, the way I used to when my husband was alive, when the house was filled with laughter, and our children ran around leaving toys and noise everywhere. Now the only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. A reminder that time keeps moving, even when hearts stand still. It wasn't that my children stopped loving me. They just got busy. They had lives of their own, jobs, families, responsibilities. I told myself this 100 times, but no matter how much I tried to understand, the truth stayed heavy inside me. Love doesn't always disappear, but sometimes it forgets to visit. That morning, as sunlight touched the empty chair in front of me, something inside me broke gently, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in quiet realization. This was what motherhood had led to. Not punishment, not regret, just silence. I thought of all the times I had stayed awake when they were sick, all the birthdays I planned with so much care, the nights I prayed for their success, the meals I made even when I was too tired to stand. I had given every piece of myself to them. And now, I was left with echoes of their laughter and the warmth of memories that had grown cold. I looked at the second cup of tea, still steaming, and whispered softly, "You see, old friend, we're still waiting, but no one's coming today." And that was when it hit me. The moment I understood that motherhood is not just love and sacrifice. It is learning to live with the quiet ache of being remembered only sometimes. That was the day loneliness sat across from me and didn't leave. Before the house fell silent, it was once the warmest place on our street. My name is Margaret Thompson, but everyone used to call me Maggie. For most of my life, I was simply Mom. That word was my world. It carried laughter, noise, and meaning. I lived in a small town in Oregon, in a little white house with green shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. My husband, Daniel, built that swing for me one summer when we were young and broke but happy. We had 2 children, Michael and Emily, and they were the sunshine of our lives. In those early years, our home was never quiet. Michael was always running around, pretending to be a superhero, while Emily followed him everywhere, clutching her teddy bear. I can still hear Daniel's deep laugh echoing through the hallway, and the sound of the radio playing soft country music in the kitchen while I cooked. There was always something baking in the oven, and the smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the house. I remember the mornings best. Michael trying to find his missing homework, Emily refusing to eat her cereal unless it had extra honey, and Daniel reading the newspaper with his coffee, pretending to stay calm amid all the chaos. Those were the moments I thought would last forever. But time, as I later learned, doesn't make promises. It just moves forward. Daniel passed away too early. Heart failure, the doctor said. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. The day before, he had been fixing the mailbox and joking about how old we were getting. Then, just like that, he was gone. Losing him was like losing the rhythm of my world. But I had my children, and that gave me strength to keep going. After his funeral, Michael held my hand tightly and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you now." And I believed him. Because when a son says that with tears in his eyes, a mother's heart trusts it like a promise written in stone. I pulled out a small notebook I carried and began to write. Not a letter this time, but my thoughts. Maybe loneliness isn't a punishment. Maybe it's life's way of reminding us to love ourselves the way we once loved others. That thought stayed with me. Later that week, something unexpected happened. I received a package in the mail. It was from John. Inside was a small wooden frame, the same one that used to hang in the hallway years ago. It held a photo of him and me, taken when he was about 10. There was a short note attached. Found this while moving things around. Thought you might want it. Hope you're doing okay, Mom. My hands trembled as I held it. The photo was faded, but the smile on his little face was still bright. I sat there for a long time, staring at it, realizing how love changes form. It doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just forgets how to show itself. That night, I placed the photo on the bedside table and whispered, "Thank you, John." But even that small gesture couldn't hide the truth. I had been left behind, not out of cruelty, but out of life's quiet drift. My children had built their worlds, and I was no longer part of their daily stories. I stood by the window, looking out at the dark street, the soft glow of the porch light illuminating the path that led nowhere. And that's when it truly sank in, not as a thought, but as a feeling. They weren't coming back. Not in the way they used to. And for the first time, I stopped waiting. I didn't turn off the porch light that night. I left it on, not for them, but for myself. A small symbol of warmth that I could still give, even if no one else came to receive it. That moment, that quiet, painful acceptance, was when everything changed. It was the day I realized that love, once it has done its duty, sometimes has to let go. And perhaps motherhood, too, isn't about being needed forever. It's about learning to find peace when you no longer are. The morning after that quiet realization, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just still. I woke up before sunrise, as I often did, but instead of lying there listening to the house creak and sigh, I got out of bed and walked to the window. The sky was painted in soft shades of gold and pink, and the first light of dawn stretched across the yard like a gentle hand touching everything it loved. I stood there for a while, wrapped in my shawl, watching the world wake up. The birds began their song, and the wind carried the faint scent of blooming lilacs. It had been years since I'd noticed how beautiful mornings could be. That day, I decided to start over. Not by changing my life, but by changing the way I saw it. I made myself a real breakfast, not just toast and tea. I scrambled eggs, made coffee, and even set the table with a small vase of fresh flowers. It felt strange at first, sitting alone at a table meant for four, but as the sunlight warmed my face, I smiled. Maybe being alone didn't have to mean being lonely. Over the next few days, I began to fill my time with small, meaningful things. I started tending the garden again, really tending it, not just watering out of habit. I planted new seeds, trimmed the overgrown bushes, and cleared the old flower beds. My hands, though slower now, remembered every motion, every rhythm. The earth, too, seemed to remember me. There was peace in the soil, something grounding, forgiving. Neighbors began to notice the change. One morning, the woman next door, the same one whose children had moved in months ago, waved to me from across the fence. "Your garden looks lovely," she called out. "Thank you," I said with a smile. "Yours will too once spring takes over." She laughed softly. "Maybe you can teach me a few tricks." And so, once a week, she'd come over with a cup of coffee, and we'd talk while planting and pruning. Her name was Nancy, and she reminded me that friendship doesn't always have to be loud or young. Sometimes it's just quiet companionship shared over a garden fence. I also began visiting the community center more often. Margaret, the kind woman I'd met before, became a dear friend. We'd sit for hours, talking about our pasts, our families, our regrets. She once said something that stayed with me. "You know, sometimes the people who forget us are the ones we loved the most. But that doesn't mean our love was wasted. It just means we gave them enough to keep walking." Her words settled in my heart like a balm. I began to understand that motherhood wasn't about being remembered every day. It was about having given enough love that your children could live without you, even if it hurt. In the evenings, I started writing again. Not letters this time, but thoughts, memories, lessons I'd learned along the way. My little notebook became a kind of diary, a companion for my reflections. One entry read, "Love doesn't disappear when people leave. It stays in the corners of the house, in the scent of coffee, in the laughter that once filled the air. It stays, even when no one's around to feel it." The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. A few months later, I joined a small reading group at the library. Every Wednesday afternoon, a handful of us would sit in a circle and share stories. Some were funny, some sad, but all were honest. I didn't talk much at first, but eventually, I started reading little pieces from my notebook. One day, after I finished reading a short entry about finding peace in solitude, a woman came up to me and said, "That made me cry. I think we all needed to hear that today." Her words made me realize something. Maybe my story wasn't just mine. Maybe it was the story of many mothers, waiting in silence, holding on to memories. That night, I went home feeling something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Weeks passed, and life began to move in its own gentle rhythm again. Emily would call once in a while, John would send a message here and there, but I no longer waited by the phone. I still loved them, of course, deeply and endlessly, but I had stopped measuring my happiness by their attention. One afternoon, Emily finally came to visit. It had been almost 2 years since she'd last walked through that front door. When she stepped inside, she looked around as if everything had changed, and maybe it had. "Mom, the house looks beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you, dear," I replied. "I've been keeping busy." She smiled, but her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I haven't been around much. Life just got away from me." I reached out and held her hand. "I know, Emily. Life does that sometimes." For a moment, the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of forgiveness. We spent the afternoon together, cooking, laughing, talking about old times. It felt natural, easy, like the years apart had melted away. As she was leaving, she hugged me tightly and said, "I'll visit again soon, Mom." I smiled, not because I believed it, but because I was grateful for that moment. And that was enough. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. The light spread across the sky, painting everything gold. I thought about my life, the years of giving, the years of waiting, and the quiet peace that had finally found me. I realized that love doesn't vanish when others forget to return it. It transforms into strength, into peace, into a quiet acceptance of life's seasons. I wasn't the same woman who used to sit by the window waiting for a phone call. I was still a mother, still full of love, but now that love had found new places to live, in the garden, in the laughter of friends, in the stories I shared with others. That night, I wrote one final note in my notebook. Maybe loneliness isn't the price of motherhood. Maybe it's the echo of love that once filled the house, a reminder that we were once needed, and that was enough. As the stars began to appear, I turned off the lights inside the house and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and gentle, carrying the faint scent of roses. I looked at the porch light, still glowing softly, and for the first time, I didn't leave it on for someone else. I left it on for myself, because I had finally learned that even in solitude, love still exists, not as something we wait for, but as something we carry quietly within us. And with that, I whispered into the night, "Thank you for everything. To the memories, to the pain, to the love that made me who I am. The years have a way of softening everything, even the sharpest edges of pain." When I look back now, I don't see my life as a story of loneliness, but one of love that stretched across time, even when it was silent. I sit most evenings on the same porch where I once waited for my children to visit. The air feels familiar, gentle, carrying the scent of lilacs and freshly cut grass. The garden is alive again, bright, full, forgiving. The roses bloom every spring. And I think of Emily's laughter, how she used to chase butterflies between the flower beds when she was a little girl. Sometimes, the memories come like warm sunlight, soft and golden. Other times, they arrive like a quiet rain, bringing tears I no longer try to hide. But they don't hurt the way they used to. They just remind me that I've lived a life full of love, even if it didn't always come back the way I hoped. People often say that time heals all wounds. I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal, it teaches. It teaches you to breathe through the ache, to find beauty in small moments, and to love yourself when the world grows quiet. I've learned that being alone doesn't mean being forgotten. Sometimes, it's life's gentle way of giving you back to yourself. The silence that once scared me has become my peace. The house that once echoed with voices now hums with the quiet comfort of my own thoughts. I've made new friends at the community center. People who understand what it means to have loved deeply and lost gently. We share stories, laughter, sometimes tears. And through them, I've discovered that even in the later chapters of life, new beginnings are possible. Every now and then, Emily or John still call. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. The conversations are lighter now, warmer. I no longer wait for them. Instead, I welcome them when they come. Because love, I've realized, isn't measured in visits or phone calls. It's measured in the quiet, knowing that no matter where they are, a part of me still lives in their hearts. One evening not long ago, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The light reminded me of all the sunsets I'd seen throughout my life, each one marking another day of love, loss, and endurance. I whispered softly to the wind, "You did well, Mary." Because for the first time, I felt proud, not for what I had done for others, but for what I had learned to do for myself. To forgive, to let go, and to keep loving. If someone were to ask me what motherhood truly means, I'd say it's not just raising children. It's raising love itself. It's watching it grow, wander, change, and sometimes drift away, and still smiling, knowing it all began in your heart. Before I go to bed each night, I still glance at the old photo on my bedside table, the one of John and me on that summer day long ago. His smile is frozen in time, and every time I see it, I whisper, "I'm still here, sweetheart." Then I turn off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the porch lamp outside. That light, once meant for others, now feels like a small symbol of my own strength. A reminder that even in solitude, love can keep shining. Because the truth I've come to understand is simple. Loneliness isn't the end of love, it's just its quiet echo. And echoes, if you listen closely, are proof that something beautiful once existed. So I live now with peace in my heart, grateful for every joy and every sorrow that shaped me. I've learned that the greatest gift life gives is not to be needed forever, but to have loved so deeply that even silence remembers your voice. And as another sunset fades beyond the hills, I close my eyes, breathe in the soft air, and smile. Because this calm, this peace, this love, is enough.